Island hopping is a strategy used by the United States to gain military bases and secure small islands in the Pacific. The technique the U.S. troops used were targeting the weaker islands that were not as strongly defended by the Japanese. They took control of those islands, quickly constructing landing strips and small military bases. Then they would go from each island to attack other small islands from the bases they had established. This idea would slowly bring the U.S. Army closer to Japan, taking control of many of the surrounding islands. These hopping tactics were led by General Douglas MacArthur, the commander in the Southwest Pacific, and Admiral Chester W. Nimitz, the commander-in-chief of the Pacific Fleet. However, island hopping was very slow and costly. The Japanese, having the advantage for controlling most of the islands and being native to the area, caused the U.S. difficulties. The U.S. were not used to guerrilla-style fighting and also fought with illnesses such as malaria, dysentery, and skin fungus. Overall, island hopping was successful, allowing the U.S. to capture enough islands to set up a mainland invasion on Japan.
The Battle of Iwo Jima started on the 19th of February and ended on the 26th of March 1945. The two main parties involved in the battle are the U.S. and the Empire of Japan. For the U.S. had generals like Holland Smith, and the Empire of Japan had leaders like Tadamichi Kobayashi. The battle was on the small island Iwo Jima, which is part of the Volcano Islands, about 20,719,904 miles long. The highest point is Mount Suribachi. The weather is mostly in the 60s and 80s, so mostly warm weather. The island was used to tell the mainland of Japan about incoming bombings, so it was very important for the U.S. to capture. The U.S. took the island west to Iwo Jima Marinas before the battle started and used it as a base for the battle. In this battle, the Japanese were massive underdogs in the battle. Instead of trying to win the battle, Kobayashi, a lieutenant general for Japan, just wanted to seriously injure the U.S. Army so they would reconsider attacking the mainland of Japan. The U.S. in June 1944 would send air raids to Iwo Jima. Iwo Jima ended up being the longest battle that took place in the Pacific Theater. The U.S. wanted to take over Mount Suribachi, which was one of the Japanese forts were. When the U.S. actually landed on the island, they had to go through the defenses on the beach. There were machine guns and bunkers they had to get through. Once the U.S. defeated the defenses, the Japanese side knew they were going to be defeated, so General Kobayashi, who was against banzai attacks, knew the only way to take out more Americans was to use this tactic. Even with the Americans destroying the Japanese soldiers wouldn't surrender, so they fought to the death. Once the U.S. took Mount Suribachi, the Japanese was basically defeated, even though the Japanese still controlled the northern side of the island. There was not much they could do. Knowing they would lose, the Japanese took out as many American soldiers as they could before they ultimately lost. By the end of the battle, of the 22,060 Japanese soldiers on the island, 18,844 died from the battle or from committing suicide. On the American side, about 26,000 casualties and 6,800 died. One of the most famous parts of the Battle of Iwo Jima was the raising of the flag, which is when 5 American soldiers raised the flag on top of Mount Suribachi. The picture of this event is one of the most iconic war pictures. This battle was important because without Iwo Jima, the Japanese would not have any warnings against air raids.
Battle of Okinawa is the one of last battles in World War II, happened in Ryukyu Island in Okinawa. This battle started in April 1st, 1945 and ended in June 22nd of the same year. After the campaign of island hopping, the Allies wanted to approach Japan and decided to use Okinawa as a starting point because it was only 340 miles away from the mainland of Japan. Because the majority of Japanese soldiers were in south part of Okinawa, the north part of Okinawa was very quickly captured by Allies, which caused Japan Army to send General Mitsusu Yoshijima and officer Isamu Cho to defend their land, but it didn't really work. In April 7th, Allies destroyed 8 ships, including the Yamato, the biggest battleship Japanese Navy had. The only way Japan could slow their enemy was using kamikaze attacks, which made Allies to send their troops to south part of Okinawa. In May 29th, the Allies captured the Castle Shuri, and 3 days after, Japan lost 85% of their soldiers. Japan started collapsing from inside. The commander of Japanese army, Ota Minoku, committed suicide with all his soldiers and their families. And the remainder of Japanese defenders were destroyed in June 15th. In June 18th, General Simon Buckner Jr., the commander of the Allied troops in the Battle of Okinawa, was killed from Japanese attack, but it didn't make any change. Finally, in June 23rd, Mitsuru Ushijima and Asamu Cho surrendered by committing suicide. The war ended that day. Also known as Typhoon of Steel because of the intensity of kamikaze attacks from the Japanese defenders. The battle caused the most number on casualties in the Pacific Theater during World War II, although it only lasted 83 days. Japan had 120,000 soldiers during it, including 40,000 Okinawan local conscripts, and lost 90% of them. And Allies only lost less than 10% out of 183,000 of their soldiers.
During the end of World War II, America had to turn to desperate measures to end the conflict that threatened to destroy both the Japanese and American nations. In the years previous to and during the war, American scientists, supported by funds given by the U.S. government for an atomic research program, began developing the nuclear bomb, a weapon fueled by internal nuclear fission reactions colliding in massive detonations. On August 6, 1945, at 8:15 a.m., the first atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, a city with a population of approximately 350,000, situated only 500 miles from the capital city of Tokyo. As part of American Commander Douglas MacArthur's plan, codenamed Operation Downfall, to distract the Japanese forces as Americans assembled to attack. Transported by a B-29 bomber named the Enola Gray, the 900-pound uranium bomb Little Boy was detonated 2,000 feet above Hiroshima with the force of nearly 15,000 tons of TNT, wiping out 90% of Hiroshima's population and killing thousands more due to radiation poisoning. Following this event, on the very same day, America sent a warning to the Japanese people, reading, "To the Japanese people, America asks that you take immediate heed of what we say on this leaflet. We are in possession of the most destructive explosive ever devised by man. A single one of our newly developed atomic bombs is actually the equivalent in explosive power to what 2,000 of our giant B-29s can carry on a single mission. This awful fact is one for you to ponder, and we solemnly assure you it is grimly accurate. We have just begun to use this weapon against your homeland. If you still have any doubt, make inquiry as to what happened to Hiroshima when just one atomic bomb fell on the city." The leaflet continues to ask the Japanese people to pursue peace. When this request is denied, a second leaflet follows, "Evacuate your cities. Attention Japanese people, evacuate your cities. Because your military leaders have rejected the 13-part surrender declaration, two momentous events have occurred in the last few days. The Soviet Union, because of this rejection on the part of the military, has notified your ambassador Sato that it has declared war on your nation. Thus, all powerful countries of the world are now at war with you. Also, because of your leaders' refusal to accept the surrender declaration that would enable Japan to honorably end this useless war, we have employed our atomic bomb. Act at once, or we shall resolutely employ this bomb and all of our other superior weapons to promptly and forcefully end this war. Evacuate your cities." When the Americans were met with further resistance from Japanese militants, they followed through on their threat. 3 days from the attack on Hiroshima, a second B-29 bomber dropped the 10,000-pound plutonium bomb Fat Man on Nagasaki, resulting in a 22-kiloton blast that decimated 2.6 square miles of land and killed over 40,000 Japanese citizens. Prompted by the second attack, Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's surrender to the United States and, on August 15th, on the USS Missouri, the Emperor signed a formal surrender, effectively bringing the Japanese front of World War II to a close.